Hey guys! So this week's video we're going to be doing phrases that are commonly used, and we're going to be looking into the origins of where they come from. Raining cats and dogs.
Early bird gets the worm? Where did these phrases originate? The video this week was inspired by my mom, who loves words and idioms. So without further ado, let's get started.
Phrase number 1, for Pete's sake. And I know you guys have all heard this one. This is often an expression used in disgust or impatience, although it's not quite as oftenly used these days. Peter is the name of an apostle chosen by Jesus, so there's a biblical connotation there. Euphemism, instead of saying for God's sake, they would use Peter instead. Later on, people just kind of cut it short to Pete for Pete's sake, and that's where this one comes from.
Okay, our next phrase is flash in the pan. A flash in the pan is often used to describe something that's disappointingly short-lived. There was an old type of gun that had a pan in which a trail of powder led from the charge to the flint. Sometimes the powder ignited, but the gun didn't go off. Hence, it was merely a flash in the pan. Every time I think of a flash in the pan, I think of me cooking, except it's not a flash in the pan, it's a flame.
And the next one we have is under the weather, which we all know is commonly a phrase for feeling sick or not quite as your normal self. This is basically to be unable to function properly and not feel well. The phrase is a nautical origin, and it comes from when a sailor was ill, they would put him under the deck. So that way he would technically be under the weather and he would be able to feel better and heal more at a rapid pace.
Our next phrase is let the cat out of the bag. I'm sure most of you have heard this before. This is used to oftentimes divulge a secret. In times gone by, farmers would bring suckling pigs to the markets wrapped up in a bag. Dishonest ones would substitute a cat for a pig. If someone let the cat out of the bag, the deceit was uncovered.
And our next phrase is bull in a china shop. And I know some of you have at least heard this one, and it refers to a situation where a person finds themselves out of place and deals roughly with a delicate problem. It's widely believed that the phrase came about from real-life situations when cattle were brought into the market in London in around the 17th century.
The next phrase is between a rock and a hard place. I'm sure most of you have heard this before. Basically, it means you're out of options. It's a somewhat inaccurate reference to a Greek epic poem, the Odyssey. There's a passage where the hero has to decide whether to sail close to the monster Scylla or the whirlpool Charybdis. But if you type it into Google Images and search the images on the site, you'll find it has a completely different meaning.
And I know that one or two of us at least have all heard our parents say, the early bird gets the worm. And as annoying as this saying is, it's actually basically whoever arrives first has the best chance of success. And usually from our parents that meant getting up way earlier than we wanted to. This phrase was first recorded in John Ray A's collection of English proverbs in 1670. Unfortunately then the wording was a little different than it is now, and it was the early bird catcheth the worm, and it's been changed with the times obviously.
Okay, the next phrase is beat around the bush. Most often this is said when someone is trying to avoid an issue. In hunting, it's often necessary to beat the underbush noisily in order to flush animals out into the open. A timid and unwilling hunter will oftentimes beat around the bush, making a show of finding and killing the beast, but not actually doing so.
Our next expression is the pot calling the kettle black. This one is not so commonly used nowadays, but you do hear it from time to time, and it's generally understood that the person is accusing the pot to share some of the quality with the target of their accusation, the kettle. The pot is mocking the kettle for a little soot when the pot itself is thoroughly covered in it, basically meaning they're both black. An alternative interpretation recognized by some but not all people sources is that the pot is sooty, being placed on a fire, while hence when the pot accuses the kettle of being black, it is the pot's own sooty reflection that it sees. The pot accuses the kettle of a fault that only the pot has, rather than one that they both share. The origin of this phrase traces back to a 19th century poem, The Pot and the Kettle.
The next phrase is don't lose your temper. The word temper originally derives from the Latin word temperare, which means a correct mixture. A temperare person was someone whose humors were in balance or mixed correctly. To lose your temper meant that something was out of whack.
And our next phrase today is take it with a grain of salt. This is definitely a little bit of an older one. This phrase intends for someone to view something with skepticism or not to take it literally. Theories of this phrase's origin are from the Pliny and the Elder's Naturalis Historia regarding the discovery of a recipe for an antidote and a poison. In the antidote, one of the ingredients was a grain of salt. Threats involving poison were thus to be taken with a grain of salt, and therefore taken less seriously. And we've all heard that alternate expression, take it with a grain of salt, a slice of lime, and a shot of tequila, referring to life.
The next phrase is a wild goose chase. A wild goose chase is a pointless search. This was once named for a short horse race, and rightly so because the positions of the horses resembled places in flight. Except it wasn't much of a race because, well, no one could win.
So our next one today is caught red-handed, and this basically has its origins in Scotland in the 15th century, and it refers to people that used to murder or poach other farmers' animals, and they were caught red-handed, i.e. with blood on their hands.
Okay, the next phrase is raining cats and dogs. Raining cats and dogs is often used to symbolize that it's pouring outside. In Norse mythology, cats symbolized heavy rain, while dogs were associated with the storm god Odin, and therefore represented howling wind, therefore leading to the expression, it's raining cats and dogs.
And our next phrase today is red herring, and this is a distraction from the main issue or something that's misleading. It comes from a fox hunting a red herring that has a strong odor. Hounds chasing a fox could be distracted by the smell of the herring and start following that instead. And in literal sense, there's no such thing as a red herring. It refers to a very strongly smoked or cured kipper that begins to turn a red color once it's finished.
Okay, the next phrase is baker's dozen. A baker's dozen is most commonly referred to the number 13 instead of 12. Its origins lie in the fact that many societies throughout history have had extremely strict laws concerning bakers' goods, due to the fact that it was fairly easy for bakers to cheat patrons and sell them less than for what they were actually getting.
And our next phrase today is up to scratch, meaning something that is passable or acceptable. This phrase was originally used as a boxing term. One line was scratched into the ground to mark the point where the fighters would meet, and by failing to come up to that scratch line, one would automatically default the match.
Okay, the next phrase is a hop, skip, and a jump. A short distance, as in it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from my place to yours. This expression, dating from the 1700s, originally referred to an exercise game called hopscotch, involving these movements. But by the mid-1800s, it was also being used figuratively for the short distance covered from one place to another.
Our next term today is gone haywire, and this refers to not happening in an orderly fashion. From the written record, it appears the use originated among the North American loggers around 1900, who often used haywire to make repairs. These repairs were often considered shortly or unreliable.
Okay, and the last phrase for this video is start from scratch. This phrase means to start again from the beginning, no matter how far into the task you are. Now, during medieval times, horse race competitors would start at a line that was scratched into the ground by a sword. If competitors cut corners, or strayed from the set course, they would have to start again from the scratch. Okay, so this has been 20 phrases and their origins. We hope you enjoyed the video.
Subscribe for a new video every Wednesday, and as always, thanks for watching. Peace.
Okay, and the last video for this video is last video. Okay, so this has been 20 origins, or 20 origins.